And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
145! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Hello there from NSF. This is Lon Seidman, and you are watching Countdown to Launch. We should actually call this show Countdown to Launches because we've got two big ones coming up. New Glenn in maybe 10 hours or so, and of course Starship a little bit later. And I've got some great help on the show today to help break down the news and figure out what we're looking at here. First, I want to say hello to Alex Romero, who's going to give us some great commentary today on everything that's going on. How's it going, Alex?
It's going fantastic. We got a little bit more breathing room. We'll talk about that as well. But it seems like we're getting just hours away from, that first launch of New Glenn, and then we're gonna have Starship right after that.
We got countdown clocks going all over the place around here, and the back channel has been very busy. I know everyone's gearing up, trying to get the energy ready to go, because it's going to be a very busy day here at NSF. And joining us also on the call today is my good buddy Sawyer Rosenstein. How you doing, Sawyer?
Hey Lon, it's good to see you. It's good to be back for another countdown to launch. And yeah, it is launch day, my dudes, for one big rocket.
That's right. And it seems like, we used to go from like a launch once a quarter to now like every other day. And it's now going to be hopefully just a couple hours away for yet another new rocket taking off. And of course, that new rocket is New Glenn. And we're about 10 hours away. It's going to lift off around what? Around 1 a.m., gentlemen? Is that the plan for tonight?
That's the hope, at the beginning of a 3-hour window from 1 to 4 a.m. Eastern.
So this is a brand new rocket. It's using engines that we've seen operate before, Alex, right? That's the same engines that the Vulcan rocket was launching with, right?
Yeah, it uses B4 engines, 7 instead of 2, because Vulcan uses just 2 of them, and then it's supported by SRBs and whatnot. Whereas the New Glenn has 7 of them, of course, and it pushes also an upper stage of hydrogen and everything, but it's also larger. It's 98 meters tall and 7 meters wide. It's quite a larger rocket than Vulcan. So we're going to see, hopefully, those light up in less than 10 hours from now. And, knock on wood, because lately New Glenn has not had a good run in terms of the weather being on its favor, right? So we'll try to see if they can battle the weather, not at launch, because the launch weather looks to be, really good. The Space Launch Delta 45 has released a launch weather forecast, and it's looking great for launch. The problem was, at least in the past few days, for recovery out there in the Atlantic Ocean. So hopefully we see those B4s not only light up for launch, but also for landing. That's always exciting.
And Sawyer, I remember SpaceX, when they were first trying to get Falcon 9 to land in those barges, we had, 6 launches before they even put legs on the rocket, and many more until it actually was able to land. It looks like Blue Origin's trying to do the, swing for the fences here to get a successful launch to orbit and a recovery. Do you think they're ready to do that without any test launches first?
I mean, they don't have any test launches for this particular vehicle landing, but they do have New Shepard. While it is obviously a much smaller scale, using a different propellant than the booster's first stage, it's still, hey, you've got some experience with landing a vehicle from a suborbital trajectory. That's a good start. As for this, I mean, yes, you mentioned SpaceX started without the landing legs, and they added them, then they started with the soft splashdowns, then the not-so-soft landings on the barges originally. They had the successful actually landing with the RTLS before finally actually going and landing the booster for CRS-8 on a barge. I mean, with this one at least, weather is 90% go from the 45th Weather Squadron. The solar activity risk is low. The offshore landing weather, most importantly, is also listed as low.
Finally.
So I think yeah, finally. So I think at this point, I mean, they've got everything going in their favor. They've got some kind of experience under their belt. It's going to be exciting to see.
And David Limp, who's the CEO of Blue Origin, confirmed on X that the weather is looking much better today versus yesterday. So we will see, hopefully, at 1 a.m. a successful liftoff and maybe a successful landing. And Alex, there's some payload on this rocket, too. It's not going up empty.
Yeah, it's carrying the Blue Ring Pathfinder. So Blue Origin has been developing for a while, for a few years already, this Blue Ring platform, so to speak. It's sort of like a mix of an orbital tug, but also it has capabilities of a satellite with communications, its own power systems, propulsion systems. So it can both deploy payloads, right, up to, I think, 2.5 tons, and also host payloads. So you can have it just free flight, right, and be sort of around Earth and maybe other places. Who knows? It's sort of like the Photon bus that Rocket Lab developed, right? So you can use it sort of like a tug to move other satellites, or you can put the payload the satellites have, right? The solar panels, the antennas, a camera, or whatever you want to put on your thing. Instead, you put it on the actual tug, on the Photon, and you can use that. So Blue Ring is going to be pretty much like that. On this Pathfinder, it's just the core elements. It's just, some basic communication and guidance systems. It's not going to be the full package, essentially, but it's just the core systems so that they can test all of that for, in the future, be able to use the full thing. It's going to be a lot larger. If, I don't know if we have pictures of how it looks. The Pathfinder is very, very tiny inside of New Glenn's fairing. It's a 7-meter wide fairing. It's super tiny inside of it, but once it's fully, built out and developed, and you put a lot of satellites around it and everything, it's definitely going to be a lot more roomy.
And so I don't think people realize, I think for those of us not, I'm a space enthusiast, but people watching who may not be as enthusiastic about space as we are, this is yet another rocket, but this one's a lot bigger than what we've seen with Falcon 9, and to some degree even with Vulcan, right? You can fit a lot more payload on here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in terms of just size, you're talking a 98-meter tall vehicle here. We're talking 7 meters in diameter, in particular, and probably most importantly, in the area where you're able to actually have payload. Because that's the thing that we're talking about here with this vehicle is, yes, it's a big rocket. Yes, Starship is definitely bigger. But for right now, in terms of active volume that it can take within that payload fairing to space, it's pretty much at the top right now. The amount of volume that you have inside this vehicle is massive with that 7-meter fairing, the tallest fairings that have been made to this point. I mean, just look at the payload there, Blue Ring, in comparison to the size of that fairing. It's ginormous. It's kind of comical how small that thing is. So, I mean, yeah, it's big in that sense. And I think that's going to be its main selling point, because I know a lot of people are going, well, what's the point of that if we have Starship, or we have something like Falcon Heavy, or you can get a bunch of launches with Falcon 9. This is going to be the rocket that can launch the large-sized payloads. You've got a heavy lift vehicle, so it can be heavier, it can be larger, and you can still get it into these medium Earth orbit geostationary transfer orbits that are so important, especially to customers such as, say, the military.
And they apparently have a lot of orders already, so this payload size is really critical. And we have a question. This one might be good to continue on with what you were just talking about there, Sawyer. Eric Soder in the chat was wondering, will they recover the fairings on this also like they do on Falcon?
For this particular flight, probably not, but we have seen them actually do some fairing recovery testing. This was a couple of years ago, I think, at this point. They actually took the giant fairing halves out to the turn basin at the Kennedy Space Center right near the VAB, and they brought them out to sea and were doing some lift tests with them, working in the water. So it seems like it's something they want to do in the future, but not as of just yet.
So we'll have plenty more launches, I think, to go. And Alex, the second stage on this New Glenn rocket is not recoverable, similar to Falcon. Is that right?
Yeah, for now, the second stage is expendable, but you know how they are at Blue Origin. Sometimes they keep their cards, really close, because they have already toyed with the idea of a reusable second stage. In fact, for if you watch the interview that Tim did and tour that Tim did of the Blue Origin factory at KSC and also of the pad, Jeff Bezos, he talks about having this parallel sort of development of both an expendable second stage that is very, very cheap and very producible. Like, you can just make it as cheap as possible so that you essentially don't need to reuse it, right? And then on the other hand, you have the other option of just make a second stage that is so reusable, like you don't need to refurbish it. You just land it, reuse it again, right? So you have they have those two competing teams essentially, and we've seen already as well, them making like prototype tanks. One of them was Jarvis tank. I believe the whole project itself is the Clipper upper stage project, if I'm not mistaken, and we've even seen like potential patents of what it will look like, and there's some ideas going around there. We don't know, of course, because some of these things are pretty much under wraps, so to speak, but it could be a possibility in the future. And this is sort of like the first step. This is Blue Origin going into like Falcon 9 stage, where we're going to reuse first the first stage, right? We'll see about the fairings, and we'll see also about the second stage. But of course, New Glenn is a lot larger, so they have capability to, with a few upgrades, also reuse the second stage and not take a lot of hit in the payload capability, right? Because you need to add you need to add all of the recovery assets and everything. Need to reserve fuel to be able to land the second stage. So of course that kind of removes some of the performance out of the rocket, and you can see some of those shots from the tour.
And we want to thank Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut, for letting us use this footage. Some really good footage from inside the factory there. And Blue Origin has been very secretive about their development. Whereas SpaceX has been developing Starship at the side of the road, and we've all been zooming our cameras in there. So I think we'll find out a lot more as time goes on here. And the payload capacity is certainly one of the competitive advantages of this rocket right now. But Sawyer, at some point when Starship starts launching on regular missions, it's going to have significantly more payload capacity, but there might be some other trade-offs, right?
I mean, I would think so. It's really going to depend on what you're trying to bring up, and also, again, the variance of Starship as it goes along. Right now, I feel like Alex will probably have the numbers for Starship, but I know the numbers for New Glenn, the total payload fairing volume, the amount of area that you actually put stuff in it, is about 16,000 cubic feet, or 458 cubic meters, and it can carry 45 metric tons to low Earth orbit and 13 to geostationary transfer orbit. Alex, do you have the numbers for Starship on what they're planning on being able to do?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the new ones, because remember, the next launch, this upcoming 7th launch of Starship, is going to carry the new ship. You can see it there on the background, right? And so this one, they have changed the payload bay envelope, right? So they have extended the tanks in detriment of reducing a little bit the payload bay, but also at the same time, they have reduced the amount of hardware that is inside of the nose cone. So now the nose cone is more usable. So at the end of the day, kind of sort of compensates. But right now, the problem of Starship, as you can see here, it just has this pest dispenser door that only can deploy Starlinks, right? Or if you have a tiny satellite that can fit through there, then sure, it might fit through there, but they need the big doors, right? And we really don't know if it should be, like a chomper, like a payload bay door, like shuttle. It's up in the air, right? And of course, that's going to be one of the things that we're going to see in the future with Starship. But that's sort of like the advantage that New Glenn has right now, is that it could just launch any satellite that Falcon 9 launches right now. Like, it has a traditional fairing, right? So it could just do that right now. Of course, if SpaceX wanted to, they could also focus on that, but right now they're focusing on other things, like making it actually fully reusable, right? So it's two different philosophies here, where you have a New Glenn rocket where it's partially reusable. They're trying to reuse the first stage, but the second stage, they're leaving it for later. The whole thing about returning the second stage back and everything and trying to figure that out, it's probably going to take, quite some time. And also, as I just said, it will probably take away things like being able to open up the cargo door and whatever, right? And so, meanwhile, they can just launch customer payloads with a traditional fairing and see maybe if they can recover that as well. It worked for Falcon 9, maybe it works for New Glenn. Who knows?
I think for after all the investment and time they've spent making this rocket, having some customer revenue might be a very good starting point, and then they can figure out the rest of it. And speaking of customers, one of the big customers for this new rocket is going to be Amazon's Kuiper. And I was at CES this past week. I'm still trying to get my sleep back from that trip. And I found some of the terminals on display at Amazon's booth there. They didn't have anybody to talk about it, unfortunately, but they were there. And as you can see, they've got sizes very similar to what SpaceX offers with Starlink. Now, of course, the difference right now is that there are no Kuiper satellites in orbit right now. I think they had 2 up for testing purposes, but they have not yet launched the Constellation. But the payload size of this rocket is enough that they could catch up fairly quickly, I would imagine, and try to get their satellite network operational very shortly. So it was interesting to see those terminals there. They look fairly, they don't look like prototypes to me. So we'll have to see how fast they can get that stuff literally off the ground as things go on here. So I've got to get my shuttle question in here before we move on to Starship. How would we describe the payload capacity? And maybe I'll start with Sawyer here, of New Glenn and Starship vis-a-vis Space Shuttle?
That's actually a really good question.
That comes from, by the way, Luke Lanyenhag in the chat.
I'm trying to think of the shuttle numbers. I believe
The size of the payload bay?
Is that what we're comparing here, the size?
I think the size, I think the payload, right, the payload bay. Weight is a whole other factor, right? But as far as the amount of room you could fit something in the payload bay for.
I think Falcon 9 already can carry stuff that can, at least in terms of width, the length, the shuttle was longer, but with the extended, with the extended fairing, I guess, like right now, just thinking back on the things that Falcon can launch, for example, things like a big module that will probably be only on the extended Falcon 9 fairing, but I look up once the numbers, and I think the Falcon fairing, the inside is like 4.7. The outside is 5.2, but the inside, what you can actually, because you have like the thickness of the fairing, and you have panels protecting and whatnot. So I think the actual interior, the usable diameter is like 4.7, and I think the payload bay of the shuttle was also around 4 point something, 4.6 maybe, might have been that. And then the length, if I'm not mistaken, the shuttle was a lot longer. I could Google it right now, but I prefer to, just guesstimate here with what I looked up. Like, I looked these numbers a long time ago, and I remember that the Falcon 9, in terms of width, was very similar to the shuttle. In terms of the length, again, the shuttle was a lot longer. That was one of the one of the advantages of the shuttle. You could launch these big, long satellites with long optics. I'm just thinking of the Hubble, but also
the
of
Hubble,
all of
right.
the DoD satellites, the telescopes looking back down.
Which
One of the coolest-
Hubble was.
Yeah, it was filled up the whole thing.
It was.
Hubble was a repurposed military payload that was a spy satellite, basically, except, as you mentioned, instead of pointing at the Earth, it pointed out towards space. But that thing is about the size of a school bus, just for reference of what could fit inside the payload bay of the shuttle. It would be cool to see if we could have like a comparison. I think they put out a graphic saying how many trucks, I think it was, 30 trucks could fit within the payload fairing of New Glenn?
I couldn't believe that. Of course, you have to account for weight, which is a whole other factor, but still, that's a lot of volume for a
Okay,
spaceship.
I was not that far off. 18.3 meters long by 4.6 meters wide, the payload bay of the space shuttle. The long fairing of Falcon 9, if I'm not mistaken, the inside will be about 4.7 meters, and then the outside is 5.2, because it's the same width as the regular fairing of Falcon 9. And then the length, if I'm not mistaken, is sort of around 17 meters, so it's going to be very, very similar once they fly with a longer fairing. But yeah.
Yeah, and the volume, by the way, 20 moving trucks apparently is the measurement that New Glenn is using. Because again, it's the United States. We don't want to use anything that actually makes sense logically for measuring.
No. Well, what about bananas? Can they? How many bananas can it fit in the payload bay?
Oh, geez.
So we've got one more question before we move on to our second big rocket of the day here, and this is our fight question for the two of you, and I'll have Alex start first. What do you think the chance of success here for New Glenn's first flight? And I would say that we would call success the whole package here. They get the thing in orbit, they land the first stage, and the ship's got a rocket sitting on it. So, Alex, what do you think? I don't know if we still have that fight bell or not.
Full
but,
success.
Take it away.
50-50. There you go. It either is full success or not. This is the usual question, right? And I always answer the same. I have not seen anything before, right? So what am I gonna say? They've done a lot of their homework, right? But also a bunch of other companies did their homework before their first flight, and then things happened, right? And so you never know. That's one of the problems with this.
Yeah, it's hard to say. We've never seen it fly before. We know the engine works, at least on the way up, right?
Yes.
So,
I'll fight you.
The bell is rung, Sawyer. Let's hear it.
I'm going 80%. And again, the main reason that the number is not closer to 90 or 100 is because we're factoring in the booster landing. Dave Limp said, main thing, get this vehicle to orbit. If they land the booster back on this try, awesome. But it's their first try. I mean, think about all of the attempts, like I was saying earlier, with SpaceX trying to land Falcon 9 on a barge. They didn't all go fantastically. It took quite a while. So I think the orbit part, they got it. The landing part, that's where I'm docking some percentage.
All right, so that's your prediction here, and I think I'm with Sawyer here. I think the probability of successful orbit is very good, just given that we know the engines work. But the landing, of course, as we found from SpaceX's experience, is very difficult to stick it on the first try for sure. And right before we leave here, I just wanted to get this question out there because this is the first New Glenn rocket. I'm assuming they're trying to go for rapid reusability, similar to Falcon 9, where we're seeing launches a couple times a week here. So Michael Tennis wants to know, is there a second New Glenn in production, or are they going to wait for this one's data to come back before they continue cranking out more rockets? I don't know which one of you wants to grab that one.
Sawyer, you've edited the flyover videos.
Yes.
So you should know, right?
Oh, and we have seen hardware for future flights. We know for a fact they are working on boosters and things for future missions. We've seen second stages in the second stage cleaning and testing facility. 2CAT, meow meow. But yeah, it's definitely under production. When that launch will be for the second one, we don't exactly know, but they're preparing for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, they've got a business to run here. They got customers ready to go. So yeah, I would imagine they'll probably do some tweaks here and try to get more rockets out there on the pad as soon as possible.
Yeah, and also you got to think about this, right? Even if it works successfully on the first try, they might want to look at the data and tweak things and improve and whatnot, right? We see that with Starship as well. Like obviously after the first flight, they also had the hole in the pad and whatnot. But hey, that was a lesson learned, right? That was something that they learned. And they worked on it, they improved it, and they made it better. We should expect something similar with New Glenn as well. Maybe even if the first flight is successful down to the landing itself as well, right? We could still see some gap there just because they want to improve things. They want to get things better for future flights. That's always the best.
Well, we'll find out soon enough. I think we've got like maybe 10 hours or so left here. So if you're on the East Coast like I am, 1 a.m. Eastern time is the launch time, and I'll let you all figure out what that means in your particular time zone. And of course, NSF here will be covering that mission live along with Starship, which we'll be talking about here in a second. And before we jump into that, I do want to acknowledge some folks who contributed some super chats here. John Schulten, $2 super chat. New Glenn and Starship rendezvous. How can I dream? That'd be kind of fun. I mean, we had Soyuz Apollo, right, or Soyuz and the whatever rocket it was. But
You're right. It was the Apollo Soyuz test project.
Right. So we could conceivably have some kind of docking mission, and it might be necessary, right? Because we've got these moon missions. We want to get to Mars. There's a space race happening here between the U.S. and China, so it might be necessary at some point. And certainly we're docking all sorts of different types of vehicles to the International Space Station. We've got common adapters that do that, so probably not out of the realm of possibility, right? So thank you for the super chat, Josh. Go ahead.
The problem is you don't have any vehicle attached to New Glenn that would dock to it. It's not like it's Starship where you could throw a docking port on the end. I think we could see Orion dock to Starship. That would be cool, but...
That would be cool, and it may have to.
I digress.
Maybe Blue Moon, though, because Blue Moon is going to be
yes.
Blue Origin's lander on the moon, so maybe that will be a thing.
I think we're
going
going to end up docking. I think we're going to end up docking all the spaceships together, because that's what I used to do as a kid when I played with my toy spaceships. Yeah, just dock them all together.
That's what I do on KSP as well. Just dock everything together.
I never get that far in KSP. Most of my rockets don't get too far off the ground. But Gridfin, that's why I'm hosting this show and asking you 2 questions. Gridfin, thank you for your new membership. We also want to welcome Jerry Ware. And we have Mike Alpha Tango Sierra, who gifted a Red Team membership, along with Magnum, who gifted or became a Red Team member. Another gift from Lars, and Shan Rosen became a new member as well. So thank you all for your support of the channel. It means a lot to us. It keeps things rolling on here. And we also have the NSF merch store. In fact, Sawyer and I are modeling some of the NSF merch that you can get. I've got the host shirt here. I've got to get a warmer one. It's winter here. I'm getting a little chilly down in my studio. But you can find this stuff over at shop.nsf.com, NASASpaceflight.com, excuse me. And we've got some high-resolution embroidery, so you can get your mission patches, and you can collect one for each of the starships. We get them ready right before launch. This is the one for Ship 7. Can you believe it's been 7 already? Along with T-shirts and calendars, you name it. It's a perfect place to go for the space enthusiast in your life. And even though the holidays are over, you can never give a space enthusiast too much space merch. So keep on going there, and it helps keep the lights on around here. And all of the cameras that we've got set up all over the world here, bringing you this great coverage of the emerging space program that we're enjoying here on NSF. So great stuff here. I may have to pick up a few of these things for future streams. I got 2 polos. I've got to get a few more. But look at that, really nice stuff. We've got some great artists on staff too that put together this awesome merch. All right, so let's move on now to the second countdown clocker, the one that's above the one that we were just talking about. 73 hours and 22 minutes to the net time, which is no earlier than for Starship. But typically, Starship's countdowns tend to hit that mark if unless something goes awry here. So, new today, because of unknown reasons, SpaceX decided to push back the launch day by 2 days from their original point there. And we think here at NSF it could have something to do with the thermal protection system. So let me turn it over to Alex here. What have you heard?
Well, right now, it's pretty much an unknown. I woke up this morning because it was very late at night here in Spain. I woke up this morning to, the SpaceX tweet, and they said, now targeting Wednesday, January 15th or something like that. I don't really know the words off the top of my head, but I saw the tweet about the delay, and I was like, why? What's happening, right? And it's true that it seemed like maybe it had to do with the ship. They destacked ship 33 from booster 14. One of the things that we thought very, very at the beginning was maybe they need to set up like the flight termination system, because we thought at least the charges were installed at the Mega Bay 2 before the rollout happened, because there was this plaque for explosives and whatnot. We talk about that in the latest Starbase update and everything, and we'll post that tomorrow. And one of the things is that so after the destack happened, at first we thought it was because of that, to maybe pull pins to save and everything. But we didn't see really them working on any sort of place near the flight termination system. In fact, they were more working on the thermal protection system, another 3-letter word there. And so this is one of the things, right, that after they started working with that, we figured that maybe the D-stack was precisely to work on the TPS, on the heat shield essentially of the ship. They seem to also work on the booster itself, but the booster, they can work on it even without the ship on top. That's not a big deal. But essentially just, the final touches of the rocket, right? Just getting it ready for a launch. Right now, of course, it's stacked. They have not yet put back the quick disconnect. You can see there that umbilical is still not connected to the ship. We don't know what's going on because it's been already, I think, a couple of hours since they restacked the vehicle, and they really have not put that back. And so right now, we don't know why the delay. That's the short answer to that. It could be, though, part of all of this, of all of these preparations, needing to go through all of the data again. But one thing that is true, and I saw one comment talking about this in the chat, that why delay to Wednesday? It seems like weather is completely bad that day, right? It's like rainy. At least all of the different apps and different websites about weather say that it's going to be X amount of precipitation or probability of precipitation and windy and cloudy and everything. Like, why will they delay to Wednesday? And so right now, we don't know. But it could also be that Wednesday comes around and they also delay. So don't be surprised if that were to happen. Of course, knock on wood, cross fingers, all of the rituals for good luck. But it's a bit puzzling, that's for sure, that why delay to Wednesday? It seems like it's not a really good day for weather. But, they're trying to get things ready. They may need a bit more time. I'm actually surprised that they kept more or less to like middle of January since Flight 6, which was when we first knew more or less when Flight 7 will happen, with that document saying January 11th. So we haven't seen that much of a delay, and this is a completely new upper stage that they're debuting, because in all senses it's completely new, and it's quite interesting, quite amazing.
It's amazing the rapid development we're seeing here for sure. And Sawyer, speaking of the weather is looking a bit iffy, and it's not just the weather for launching the rocket, it's also for landing or grabbing it in a very precise way. And I would imagine the wind has some impact in a different way on the landing side as it does on the launch side. We discussed this a little bit before we started the show, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that again.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that people don't realize, it's not just the ground winds. It is very much the upper level winds. And of course, we talk about that a lot in spaceflight, but what exactly is the big deal with it? Well, it's not so much, it's, crazy strong winds. It's the fact that you could have winds going one direction, and then you get a strong gust that goes the other direction as you get higher up in altitude and the winds change. So as it's being bombarded with these different upper level winds, depending on the strength of them, you're talking about the vehicle having to correct left, right, to adjust for that. Sometimes it can be a really strong force, and it's a matter of the vehicle being able to compensate for it. They want to try to avoid that as much as possible and make it as easy of the descent as possible, especially then as you're kind of gliding back once you've done the boost back burn and things like that. So the wind is something that is very much kept in mind to those upper level winds, and the wind shear as it's going up and down.
So there's a lot of factors here, and that landing, Sawyer, I would imagine there's such precision involved with this, because let's look at Kennedy Space Center with Falcon landing at the Cape Canaveral Air Station, landing at one of the landing zones. You don't have to hit the bullseye exactly, but for Starship, it is a very precise landing mechanism where it's got to position itself in a very stable manner in between those chopsticks. So if the wind is blowing too much, it's got to be a factor.
I mean, yeah, there's some wiggle room in terms of where it can land on the chopsticks, but yes, you're talking a much narrower margin of error compared to, say, a giant couple 100-meter landing zone that you can kind of target anywhere within. This is definitely different. I mean, you have some of the strongest engines out there right now with the Raptors. So it's not like we're talking weak engines here that are having to try and maneuver those last couple meters. But yeah, it's still something that you have to keep in mind, is just how narrow that margin of error is. So they want everything to be right. But at the same time, that's also why they have all the different checks, that the vehicle has to be ready, that the catch tower has to be ready, and that the person in charge has to literally press the manual button that says go for catch.
Right, and that I would not want to be the person that pushes that button. Let me tell you, that's a lot of that's a lot of pressure. Alex, you talked about this being the biggest Starship ever, and we've always known Starship to be pretty big. This is bigger, so this is a whole new design, or an updated design that's larger.
Yeah, this is a Block 2 ship, right? Or version 2 or next generation, whatever name you want to call it, because there's multiple names going around, all of them official, because SpaceX, of course, uses multiple different names. And one of the things that this version is including is that it's 1 ring taller. So for those out there that use imperial units, that's 6 feet taller. For those of us like me that use metric, that's 1.8 meters taller. So it's not a huge change in how tall it is, but it's a change and it's taller. So that means it is currently the tallest launch vehicle in the world, of course, dethroning itself, Starship, but the other, vehicles, the past 5 flights were 1.8 meters shorter, and then the first one was another 1 ring shorter because they didn't have the hot staging ring, which is also 1.8 meters tall. So, yeah, dethroning Starship twice, and soon, when they debut the next generation of the booster as well, because booster is still version 1 or block 1. Again, multiple different names out there. But the next version, the next generation, that'll be another ring taller, a little bit less than a ring. It's 1.3 meters, not 1.8, but it'll be a bit taller, and that will be even taller. So it's gonna be, another dethroning there in the whole top of the tops. But yeah, I saw jokes on social media on X saying, top 3 largest rockets, Starship.
Right.
Because it's the top 3 are all Starship, but in different configurations.
And I will tell you, if I owned
some
a
people
rocket
in chat
company,
now saying that.
and if I owned a rocket company, I would continually want to make my rocket bigger than the other guy's rocket. Like, just saying, right? There's always a need for that too. So, and as we keep tracking things, a lot of times when I host this show, something breaks right in the middle of our episodes. So we can keep you informed. Right now, we have no breaking news yet at the moment, but if that should happen, we'll certainly tell you right now. But if we are off the air, you can definitely keep up with NSF's social platforms. We're on just about every platform there is, Facebook, X. So you can keep track of the news as it happens, so you can plan accordingly for when this launch will take place. Now, Sawyer, when the launch does take place, it is looking to launch a little bit later than some of the earlier flights did, I'm assuming, so they can see some of the thermal performance on the way back down. Is this mission any different than the last one we watched?
I mean, in terms of the trajectory portion and the timing, we're pretty much talking exactly the same here. We're talking that same exact liftoff time. We're talking the same planning of splashing down in the Indian Ocean. And I mean, hey, we got some great views of the launch and some spectacular views of the splashdown. So I think that's a big portion of this too, especially with the focus being on the performance of the ship. You really want to be able to see how that flip and burn and all of the re-entry features work. So why not have that closer to daylight, right?
That's right. And I also see they're looking at deploying not 10 Starlink satellites, but some simulators.
Yeah, they are similar to what they might be doing for Starlink V2. These are basically just Starlink demonstrators, kind of like a payload mass simulator in a way. They will try and actually deploy them, but it is going into that suborbital trajectory. So they're not staying in orbit. They're going to come crashing back down just like the ship, although hopefully the ship will be more controlled.
That's right. And I was looking at on the pad here. It looks like the thermal protection system is a little different. I see more tiles than we did before. And I'm guessing this is informed by the data that they've seen come back.
Oh yeah. I mean, the main thing that they're trying to do is see how many of these tiles they can get rid of. We saw that on the last flight. We see a lot of tiles that are removed this time, especially as they get ready to try and figure out the catching portion for the ship. We have the sort of structural area of where they want the catch pins to be. So these aren't the actual catch pins. They're kind of just there to simulate what they will be on the real one. But how many tiles do we need around that? Is there potential for things scraping as it comes back in? So can we avoid the tiles there? Will the thermal protection still withstand? What if we thermally cool one of these metal tiles that we're trying out here, which is pretty darn metal if I do say so myself? So, you know, it's a matter of trying different kinds of tiles, different kinds of thermal protection, and all of, hey, the best part is no part. So if you can get rid of it, get rid of it.
Get rid of it. And we just saw a tweet come in, by the way, on our other rocket that we were talking about, Blue Origin's New Glenn, that they are still targeting the launch window beginning at 1 a.m. Eastern or 0600 UTC. So it looks like things are on track there. So our countdown timer up there is going to be accurate there. And back to Starship, Alex, there's some different tests they're doing on this flight as well, in addition to that Starlink test, right?
Yeah, as Sawyer was talking about, they have these little pins, knobs, right, on the side of the ship. Very similar to the ones that we see on the booster for catching, but these are not structural. They are just essentially like, you know, fake catch pins, I guess. They are bolted onto the hull of the ship. They are not structural. Like, if they wanted to use them to lift the ship, for example, they will break off because they are not, you know, structural to the ship itself. They're just bolted on the side. There you can see some footage that Mary caught very much right after they were installed on Ship 33. And as you can see, they are very similar to the ones on the booster, just covered in those tiles, sort of like a narrow cover to survive re-entry. That's what they want to figure out on this flight. They're not trying to catch the ship. The booster, they will try to catch that, of course, you know, pending everything is good for the catch and whatnot. We saw already that, you know, on Flight 6, things did not go well, so they did not try that. But the ship will try to land in the Indian Ocean. But that re-entry will be the key to be able to get that data that they need to know that those pins are going to survive through re-entry. But it's not just the pins. There's also, like, on the sides of the vehicle, they have also removed heat shield tiles, because as you can see there, imagine, you know, the ship is about to land, right in that moment is about to get caught on the chopsticks. The chopsticks will need to close around the vehicle, and so as they do that, they slap the size of the booster of the ship, excuse me. But they do that with the booster as well. You can see that on Flight 5 it happened. They slapped the side of the vehicle, and with the ship, if you have heat shield tiles, the tiles just break off, right? You cannot have that. And so one of the things that they did in Flight 6 was try a re-entry without heat shield tiles on the side of the vehicle. They found out that it was good up to a point in the bodies of the vehicle, but some other places they needed a bit more tiles, and so they have tweaked that for this flight. They have some tapered ends on the side of the vehicle, that transition between the tiles and the bare skin metal, right, of the ship. They have those tapers going on. They also have metal tapers as well, but in the vertical direction for some of the places where you have, for example, stringers on the common dome of the ship, or on the forward dome, or, for example, around the lifting point for the chopsticks. And so those will also go through that re-entry process. It's going to be very important for them to know what's going to happen to those pieces of hardware. If, you know, eventually ships are going to come back to the launch site for a catch, and what they need to know is that all of these changes that they need to do to the ship, to these vehicles, these they need to survive. That hardware needs to survive, and this flight 7, will be the proof of fire, essentially, right? It's just going to be that trial of fire and get through re-entry, being able to see if they survive or not. And if they survive, hey, maybe Flight 8, you know, Elon once said, if Flight 7 is successful in landing, we'll try a catch on Flight 8. So, hey, maybe next flight.
Could be in the near future. So, Sawyer, it looks to me that when we think about the milestones that we've seen across the Starship development program, you know, the big ones were getting into orbit or getting to lower orbit, but getting it into something that could get them eventually into orbit. The catch, getting the re-entry system to work, all very big things. Now it feels like, Sawyer, we're kind of getting into these smaller things that are very significant to the future of the program, but perhaps from the public watching are not as big, right? Like if they get this little pin to work, maybe that can lead to a catch on the next flight. But we're seeing very incremental kinds of tests now.
I was going to say, they may seem small, but none of these are small. Again, we're talking a brand new variant of the ship here with version 2. We're talking a lot of different changes. The fact that they are working on getting that catch mechanism, the entire new dynamics of where the fins are at the top of the Starship portion. I mean, they seem small, but these are absolutely critical changes. Once they can figure out exactly what they do and don't need with that heat shield, that will determine the entire future of how this ship is going to look. Once they get, where they want to put all of the catch pins, what will and won't survive, I mean, that's going to determine the future of reusability for this whole vehicle. So, yes, while these may look minor to most people, and they're going, oh, it's basically just the same flight trajectory, it's basically the same as the last flight, there are so many of these little things that will be dramatic in the next couple of flights and for the future of Starship as a whole on just this one mission.
So there's a lot going on here, even if it feels like we've seen this before. And to be honest with you, I could see this a lot of times because it is always amazing to watch this enormous rocket lift off and sometimes come back and get caught by the chopsticks. Let me take a few questions here from the audience. Max Lynch here says, I don't really understand. How does Starship launch other payloads? It seems to be built for Starlinks or HLS. But actually, it's a matter of just adjusting that payload portion. But I'd love to hear from either one of you on how Starship can get adapted to some of these missions that we keep talking about. And whoever wants to take it.
Well, I can go with that because I ranted about that before. It's just a matter of, it's a whole iterative process, right? They're going step by step, not ferociously, I guess, because that's Blue Origin's motto. But it was just a joke. But what I tried to say is that they're going little by little, right? Let's figure out first how to launch it. Then let's figure out how to recover it. Then let's figure out how to do refueling, right? And so in the future, maybe next year, we'll know, right? We'll see. And so maybe that's going to be one of the few next steps, which is let's try a bigger payload door and things like that. Right now, they're just using that little one because one of the things that they really want to do, at least in 2025, is launch Starlinks. And they're doing a trial on that flight on Flight 7, right? Deploying those 10 simulators on this flight. So in the future, potentially, I don't know, Flight 8, 9, 10, maybe it's going to be in a couple of months, right? They may launch an operational flight of Starlink satellites. And that is one of the key revenue sources for SpaceX. So that's why right now they have prioritized this kind of payload deployment on Starship. And also because if you think about it, Starship, when it launches and it's operational and whatnot, sure, it might have some of the refueling trips and whatnot, but when it's not doing that, they may want to try upgrades. They may want to try tweaks and things like that to the design. And that's when you have the Starlink flights. They do that with Falcon 9, right? So that's one of the things where they could try out things, and by launching Starlinks, sure, it's not a customer payload, but Starlink in the future, like in the long term, it gives them revenue back, right? So it kind of compensates. It pays for the launch, essentially.
And what's amazing is I was as many of you know, I was in the Bahamas recently on a little vacation with the family, and of course I had to get up and watch a SpaceX launch right over where I was staying, and it was launching Starlinks, and every boat that I saw in the Bahamas had a Starlink antenna on it. I mean, it's a rapidly growing service for them, and because it's so good. I mean, I talked to a lot of boat people who had these dishes over that week, and all of them were raving about just how effective a communication tool it has become for them, because it is essentially a built-in thing. So what are we looking at here, gentlemen? We've got some work going on.
What's that?
Is that Danger Trailer?
I think that's one of our sites south. And yeah, I think that's Dan working on the electronics.
The problem solver, Dan?
Yeah.
This is and on the back channel here, this is our south site. Dan, Tanner, and Tanner's brother are working to get things going there. We've got power and electronics and cameras, and this is how the work gets done here, is that we've got all of this amazing infrastructure that is funded by everyone who watches and contributes to this channel. To keep these views coming to you. So we're getting ready here because there will be a launch at some point. And it could be Wednesday for Starship. It may be a little bit later depending on the weather. And that brings me to Bidford's super chat question, which is, what are the odds of a Wednesday launch due to weather forecasting being rain all day? And if experience my limited experience following these launches is any indicator, there often are little windows of opportunity where, you know what, the weather might clear enough to get that rocket off within the window parameters, and you can get it off the ground and continue your program. Sorry, you've seen that happen quite a few times, right?
Many times, yes. Bideford, thank you again for the support. I mean, yeah, I've seen launches where weather's 90% and it doesn't go, where I've seen weather where it's as low as 30% and it has gone. I mean, it really is about finding that window. SpaceX is very good at doing that. The other thing to keep in mind is that even if, let's say, they go for it and they don't decide to launch that day, whether it be weather or something else, you're getting a free wet dress rehearsal out of it. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if they do try for it and say, you know what, the weather didn't clear up in time. Although I'm sure in terms of the amount of commodities that it takes to fill this thing, that they're going to try and conserve it and say, hey, if this is our best shot on, Wednesday, then let's go for Wednesday. If it gets closer and they realize maybe this isn't our best shot, they could push it further. Also, if you work for OSHA, you see absolutely nothing next to me.
And by the way, I should add that Caesar is out there with the rest of the crew there too, getting ready for the Starship launch. And I can tell you, being now with the privilege of being able to see how everyone on this team works, there is so much that goes into this. The blood, sweat, and tears sometimes in getting these things ready for everybody to view is a lot. And what's amazing is that a lot of these cameras out there are completely off the grid. They're running. They have to be engineered to have enough solar panels to charge the batteries. It's just amazing how much work that the whole team puts into keeping this stuff going. Another super chat question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to mention, because I really feel bad, that those two countdowns that we're running parallel, there's people that are going to support both launches. So there are people that are trying to, really, really trying to be able to support both New Glenn and Starship. So really shout out to that. Of course, I'm not going to be, outing here people that are trying to do the speed run, of course. But and also Das and other people. But yeah, cross your fingers that New Glenn actually goes on time, because then they can also support Starship. And you know how cool it is when everybody at NSF can put together the work and put it out there. So let's hope for the best.
And DOTS flew out at 5 a.m. from the Cape to Boca. So, and these launch times are they're getting closer as things get delayed. These two big rockets are getting very close in time to launching here. So we'll have to see.
And if I can just point out, Lon, these aren't the only launches we're talking about this week.
No.
Technically, I mean, from the Cape, there's a Starlink scheduled tomorrow, 12-4.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, the old Starship isn't the only flight we're talking about here either. Don't forget, there's also a lunar lander, two of them launching as well. You've got Blue Ghost going as well. So there is, earlier that morning, it's like a 1 a.m.-ish window there. So all of this in the matter of a couple days. So you've got the team down at Starbase getting ready for Flight 7. You've got the team at the Cape getting ready for New Glenn and Blue Ghost and Hakuta R2. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Not one, but two lunar landers. How about that for a busy week? So yeah, we don't see that too often. So that's crazy. And here was a question from Daniel Rydell, $4.99 super chat. For Starship and Glenny, we have a lot of different names for New Glenn, don't we? How are launch times determined? We know for Starship because they're doing this based on light where they want to look at things, sunlight. But for New Glenn and others, how do they determine the launch times? There's obviously windows. Is this for the best opportunity for the payload that New Glenn is delivering that they need to launch at 1 a.m. tonight or tomorrow morning?
I mean, we don't exactly know. We do know that this Blue Rain test payload is going to a medium Earth orbit. And so it's not like it's a satellite where they absolutely have to hit a transfer window. If this was the Escapade mission, which was originally going to be the first payload on board New Glenn, that would be a different story because that has a Mars transfer window that it would have had to hit. This one, I think it's more down to targeting, hey, let's try and aim for a precise orbit so they can kind of do their version of ULA's bullseye graphic of how close they were to their target insertion, but also pick a time where, since this is a brand new rocket and you're closing, airspace for 3 hours, let's go somewhere where you're not going to disrupt as much air traffic, on a weekend or an early Monday morning, people maybe that were on vacation and are trying to make it back in time for work as late as possible, give that some time, clear the airspace up, and let the planes going to Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and that areas pass through.
I also wonder if
Disney vacations. Go ahead. Alex.
I also wonder if it has to do with the orbit, because they're going to a medium Earth orbit, right? For New Glenn, I believe it's 2,400 by 19,300 kilometers. So they're doing two burns. One is, it goes over the Atlantic, and then it enters this parking orbit around low Earth orbit, and then they do a second burn of the second stage, and then they enter that big elliptical orbit around the Earth. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that maybe what happens is that if you launch on one side of the planet at nighttime, right, when you are on the other side, on that big apogee, that 19,300 kilometer apogee, maybe that will be daylight, and so they will be able to, use that for their Pathfinder, Blue Ring Pathfinder and everything. I don't know. This is just like complete conjecture, of course, that, what will that look like given the orbit? And maybe it's related with that. I have no idea, to be fair.
So there's sometimes practical reasons, sometimes it's just known to the company. So we will find, maybe they'll give us some insight tonight when we are getting ready for the launch there to figure all of that out. So good stuff here. Let me ask you another Starship question. I'm going to attempt to answer this one with my limited knowledge here. Will they ever do a Starship Super Heavy with 3 boosters and a ship? Just slap those tanks together, kind of like a Falcon Heavy, and launch it. And I would say, if I may try to answer this one, that the likelihood is very limited because of the fact that I think Starship is designed, because it's rapidly reusable, to get things into orbit where you might be able to refuel them and then send them off someplace else. Because if you can send these things back and forth for the cost of what would normally be an airplane flight, if you will, with the space equivalent of it, you can bring fuel up to these things, fuel them in low Earth orbit, and then send them to Mars or further out, right? Is that the philosophy here?
Alex, that one's you.
How close to the mark am I, Alex? Did I get it right?
Well, I will just give the a lot of people. I'm gonna join this with another question that I see in chat often, which is like, where does Blue Origin's New Glenn fall within the whole spectrum of different rockets, right? Like, is it closer to a Falcon 9 or a Starship? And it's sort of in between. It's closer in performance to the Falcon Heavy. And the whole reason for that is because even though it's larger, Falcon Heavy combines 3 Falcon 9 cores, right? Falcon 9 boosters. And so so effectively you have a 12-meter long or like wide stage, right? Because it will be 12 on one end, and then the other is just 3.66, and so it's a bit weird. But essentially, you are combining a lot more engines, a lot more propellant. However, if you instead make it a single core, you make it a lot more efficient, and so that's one of the things that we've seen, for example, Elon talk about the Falcon Heavy. It's a good, maybe interim thing, but it was quite complicated to develop, and it's not as efficient because your upper stage is still the same size, 3.6 meters wide and everything. The fairing, it's still 5.2 meters, whereas New Glenn, it's wider, longer, taller, and everything, and it can fit larger payloads for a very similar performance to Falcon Heavy. And so, Starship, would you just slap 3 super heavy cores together? I don't think that will be ideal. What you will prefer is just make it wider, taller, and that's what we're seeing with version 2, version 3. They're stretching those, and now Elon says that maybe they'll stand only 10 meters and then extend the diameter. We'll see about that because he always talks about those things, and it's many years down the line. But I will say that it just doesn't. It's a lot of things going on together, and also for the ground support system and everything, it's not ideal. Yeah, I think single core is better.
There's a lot to it. All right, we're going to have to thank some folks for their support in a second because we are going to need to clear the air to give our team some time to rest for this evening. But before we start that process, I do want to ask both of you another fight question here. Will these flights go off on time? And you will answer in the following manner. One for New Glenn and also for Starship. Will the weather cooperate this evening and later this week? Sawyer.
Will the weather cooperate for New Glenn? Yes. For Starship, no, would be my guess. Will
Okay.
they both launch, though? That's another story. Again, with New Glenn, this is a brand new launch vehicle. It has never flown before. We're talking about a pad that has been completely redesigned. Keep in mind, before that it became the LC-36 that we see now, it used to be 36A and 36B. There were two pads on the one pad where New Glenn is now. So this is technically brand new infrastructure at this launch site here. We're talking one of the largest water towers ever built, some of the largest actual towers where the lightning system is ever built. We're talking massive fuel that needs to be loaded in both methane and hydrogen, which can be notoriously tricky. So adding all of those factors in with a brand new pad, a brand new team, and a brand new rocket, I wouldn't be surprised if things don't go exactly according to plan. Whereas with Starship, I think once the weather does cooperate, we're pretty confident to see a launch there.
Right, they've got that pad down, right? But you're right, there's been a lot of engineering work going on, not just for the rocket, but also on the ground systems there. Alex, what say you?
I think there's a good chance that, Starship delays past that 15th of January. Just looking at the data of the weather, of course, it doesn't look like it's gonna be great. And also, I'm gonna be a little bit selfish here. I would like it to be good weather. I think everybody wants there to be good weather and have good views of the whole show, because otherwise, it will not be great. To be fair, but if it happens, it happens. Even if it's SN11 weather, and I say that with the possibility that it might actually launch on SN11 weather. But of course, everybody wants it to be good, launching on good weather and good visibility conditions. I just don't see that happening this Wednesday. For New Glenn, it's the complete opposite, right? Where the weather seems to be cooperating for a launch tonight. Will the vehicle and the pad cooperate, right? They had multiple scrubs during testing of that full rocket, both for the second stage, when they tested just the second stage alone, because they did that in the September timeframe. And then recently they did the full rocket with a static fire test of the first stage. And they kept scrubbing. Like, we saw them very, getting really, really close to that T0, firing up the deluge even. And they did not get to the static fire until multiple tries, multiple different days of testing. So will it actually happen tonight? We'll see. That'll just, be part of the whole trick of whether it'll cooperate or not.
All the more reason to tune in tonight, because you can tune in and be as anxious about it as we'll be. So yes, and we'll be starting, we always start early here, so set your notification bells. I think we probably already have the live stream ready to go on our NSF YouTube page, so check it out. We will be here standing watch, and whatever views we can get, we will provide to you. And we've got cameras already trained on all the rockets, all of them. So you will not miss a thing by tuning in here to NSF. I want to thank Kevin Harrington for a $2 super chat. Mary with a great store message about needing stickers of puns. And we're going to put you on that one, Sawyer, because you are the pun master. Even off air, he has puns. Puns aplenty.
Oh, trust me, yeah. I stick with it. So
It's very
I'll make sure to
puntastic.
put that on one of the stickers.
geez.
I
See that?
stick with it.
You are an absolute genius. See that? He comes up with them like that. I wish I could be that quick. And I'm like, this is like a dad joke thing. I can't even do that. And I've got 2 kids. It's amazing, Sawyer. So Sawyer is on top of it. Anonymous with a great store message here. Muddy Creek Critters gifted 5 Red Team memberships. And we also have some long-term support here from Carson, who has been a member for 46 months. Kenneth Cannon has a quick question. We'll do a lightning round here. Ships land and sink close to China. Any ITAR concerns? I think they're pretty far away from China when they get into the ocean there, aren't they?
I mean, yeah, but given that these are typically, destroyed and sunk way down deep into the ocean, if China's going to go all the way down that deep into the ocean, get the pressure vessels needed for it, bring it all the way up, all of this while I'm sure people will be watching the boats circling the area, then they deserve it.
So unlikely, but good question though. It's good to get. I love getting these questions because it's good to think about this stuff. Bill Caravo here. I'll give this one to Alex. I think the delay is related to the NASA jet that wants to image Starship's re-entry and peak heating events. Is that still happening? That's another logistical thing, isn't it? To get it all the way over there.
Yeah, it already arrived, I think, earlier this week. Might have been a few days ago. Fun fact, I actually tried to follow it along on Flight Sim. Because I needed motivation because there's been a lot of work here at NSF. I've been preparing a lot of things in the background, and so my motivation was, following along with those flights, all the way from Houston to Honolulu, from Honolulu to Brisbane, then from Brisbane to Perth, and that was fun. But yeah, it's already there. I don't think it really had any other delays. But yeah, that was the Gulfstream plane. It's at Perth. Some people saying in chat that it's already there. Yeah, that's one of the things that I was keeping track. Maybe they're thinking of the WB-57. I believe
that's what
that
they were
one
thinking
actually.
of, right?
Yeah, that actually is going to be at New Glenn. So it's already at the Kennedy Space Center. It landed a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken, and it's already there in Florida. So it's going to image New Glenn. It has priority, I guess, in the schedule. I mean, there's a lot of different rockets out there, right, that need imaging, and right now probably New Glenn is a bit more of a priority, to be fair.
Well, there you go. So that plane is busy, and I'm sure NASA's busy keeping track of all these potential rockets they can make use of to go wherever we wish to send them. So all sorts of fun stuff here. And I'm also putting up all the store messages that we got as well. So that is it. So we're going to keep an eye on things here, folks, because we are just a few hours away now, 8 hours and 43 minutes from the potential launch of New Glenn at 1 a.m. Eastern. And then later in the week, if the weather's cooperating, we will see Starship take off. We will keep an eye on everything that is going on in the world of spaceflight, and we'll be updating on our social platforms if things change. So keep an eye on NSF, wherever you like to keep an eye on things. We are everywhere. So that is where I would suggest keeping an eye on stuff. And not only do we keep you up to date, our cameras are running 24/7 in Texas and in Florida to keep watch on all the activity that is happening across the space program here. All sorts of fun stuff, and I am very excited to see how much stuff we have to talk about here. So before we sign off, gentlemen, Sawyer, anything to close out with here?
Let's see. I mean, we're on follow the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, now on Blue Sky, and hopefully see everyone for the launch tonight. I'm looking forward to seeing you all there.
Me too. I'm going to be tuning in. And Alex?
Sawyer said Blue Sky, and I thought he was going to be doing a pun because we're going to see blue in the sky, and hopefully we get blue skies for Starship, right? So I'm going to make the pun myself because, of course, he missed it. I'm going to do the joke. But yeah, we're going to have to get a lot of sleep tonight, or rather a lot of coffee, depending on your time zone, because we're going to be live 4 hours before the launch, or at least 4 hours before the opening of the window for Blue Origin's, that first launch of New Glenn. Remember, it's a 3-hour window, so they have plenty of time to try from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. Eastern. So yeah, if you are in the nighttime time zones and everything, get coffee, get ready, because it might be a long night. If you are like me, which is still very early, it's 7 a.m. the opening of the window, I still will need coffee because we're going live 4 hours beforehand, right? So yeah, get ready for that. And of course, very happy to see whatever happens. Like, if we'll get through that.
Right.
By the way,
and
Alex, I need to come
you...
up with a punishment for that. Come on.
Oh boy, there you go. Never disappoints. And I will say I've stayed up for some of these late night launches at the Kennedy Space Center, and if they can push back in the window, they will, just to draw out the suffering of all the mosquitoes that eat you alive, although Sawyer does have good bug spray that he brings with him there. So special thank you to all of the members who have been supporting this channel over the last couple of years now, as we are actually I think we're almost at a decade now doing this. So everyone who supports the channel, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for your viewership and your subscription. Also want to thank the folks on behind the scenes here who are making us all look and sound good. Kevin and Jay are operating. Gage, Need Pizza, and Matt are running cameras today for all of us. So thank you all for the great support and great work here behind the scenes to keep us all looking and sounding our best. So stay tuned. NSF will be back in just a few hours with coverage of New Glenn's launch. I am feeling good. It's going to take off somewhere around 1 a.m., so be sure to tune in before that to get all the commentary and information you need to be an informed member of the Space Society here. That will do it for this one, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
RS-68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, with planet.
Water towers can fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Say again, SPD off. Off. It's orange!
R45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Décollage. Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane would be igniting in the flare,